Hi everyone, this is Joy from Joy Resilience, and I'm about to share with you a video tutorial about family emergency preparedness. And so I'm going to start by providing you with the workshop objectives. And this workshop is actually running on November 3rd at 6:30 here in Brantford. And so I thought I would prepare this video for those who cannot attend. So let's start with the type of emergencies. We're going to take a look at the various types of emergencies that people are likely to encounter. And then we're going to explore the dimensions of preparedness. So what does it mean to be prepared? In what ways do we need to prepare? Then we'll take a look at preparedness self-assessment. So where are you now with your preparedness level? What do you need to do to prepare yourself and your family? And then we'll take a look at the family preparedness plan, a structured way to examine the areas where you need to put together information and resources so that you will be ready in various types of emergencies. And finally, we'll take a look at those resources, the resources that you may already have, as well as the resources that are available to you personally, within your community, within your government, and so on. I have a long list of resources that you will have the opportunity to explore after this video tutorial or workshop. Now, having said that, it's important to discuss this emergency preparedness plan with your family. Even if they don't live with you, it's important to share with them what you're doing and make them aware that this is something that grown adults do. This is something we should all be doing for ourselves, and that way we can meet those challenges of emergencies that can come up unexpectedly and leave us stranded, if you will, unless we have the skills and the resources available. So let's take a look at who I am and why I'm doing this. I've been a community activist my entire life, but most active in the past 15 years. I volunteered for the Transition Toronto, on the steering committee, as well as Village Vancouver on the steering committee. I belonged to WOOF, Worldwide Organization of Organic Farmers, as a volunteer. And I worked on a lot of permaculture farms, not only in Canada, but I also got a chance to go to the Ireland permaculture establishment. And then I've done work with Greenpeace, Amnesty Canada, many other volunteer organizations as well. Now, my qualifications come from this as well as many other experiences and skills. I am a certified Resilience X facilitator, and I am a lifelong trainer. I've had a career as an instructor facilitator teaching technology skills for 36 years since 1989. And I've also done a lot of speaking as part of those organizations and running family emergency preparedness workshops through Transition Toronto and Village Vancouver. Now, beyond that, I am also a certified meditation teacher. I'm a certified consulting hypnotist and NLP practitioner, CBT practitioner. So these are my qualifications that I bring to the table so that I can enable and empower people watching this video or attending my workshops to become more resilient. That is the reason why I do what I do. So having said that, as I continue here, I've put together some of the images. These are also on my website, along with my qualifications of things that I've done, projects that I've worked on. I was a breast cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2012 and again in 2015. And I did the walk to end breast cancer in 2004. I'm one of 7 women in my family who have been diagnosed. And what I did was I used a holistic therapy, 7 modalities of holistic therapy to heal from cancer after I had my surgery done. So I have had a lot of setbacks, collisions, and so on and so forth. And I've learned along the way that I am as resilient as I choose to be. We all have incredible resources to be resilient in the face of all kinds of challenges, which we're going to take a look at. So I encourage you to tap into that. Know that you can get through almost anything, and that through community, we can strengthen all of ourselves and each other and become much better off learning these skills and being more confident and competent to set an example for our children and future generations. So that's why I do what I do. Now, the term preparation can mean different things to different people when it comes to emergency preparedness. For me, it's about stepping up as an adult and choosing to not only help myself to be resilient and prepared, but also be able to offer that to other people. Being responsible as an adult to care for my family, my community, and be able to tap into the resources that are available and share those resources so that we're all stronger together. So preparation, not just on an individual level. For me, it's about community as well. Now, I want to ask you to ask yourself these questions when it comes to what preparation might mean to you. And what does it make you feel like? A lot of people, when they start feeling the need to prepare, or I should say, when they avoid preparing, it's out of fear that by preparing, it's going to actually trigger some sort of disaster. And it is a backwards way of thinking. But honestly, the more you prepare, the calmer you are. It tends to reduce anxiety. It makes you feel like you can handle almost anything. The feeling of empowerment that I get for having all my ducks in a row when it comes to having food, water, vehicle, and all of that set up for me if I need to. And hopefully we won't need to, but if I need to, I won't have to scramble and panic and feel like life is going to end because I don't have what I need. So I want you to address those feelings and be realistic about them. You want to do it for yourself as someone that people depend on. So who is dependent on you? You might have children, you might have seniors that you care for. It could be anyone in your circle of contacts who is counting on you to know what to do should the need arise. And then who do you depend on? So is there anybody that you can go to that has the resources, skills, confidence to help you should you not be able to do that for yourself for whatever reason? A lot of disabled people, seniors don't have that ability. So you want to be there for them as much as you want to have someone to depend on. So what goes around comes around. Now, what are your odds? This is something that nobody can predict or describe or guarantee. When it comes to emergency preparedness, we kind of have to prepare for everything and anything. But honestly, what people tend to forget is their own physical and mental well being. You can prepare everything out there. You can prepare food and water, and like I said, all those other externals. But if you are not healthy, if your body is falling apart, if you are a smoker or you are overweight, and if you have other habits that are not healthy, mental as well as physical habits, then you're not going to have that confidence in yourself, in your own strength, and your own courage to handle whatever comes your way. So I want you to start thinking about your own physical, mental, emotional well being. Focus on that as much as or before you start looking elsewhere for material resources that will be necessary in case of emergency. So try and get yourself healthy, and then as you do that, also tap into some of the resources that are available to you to move forward with your preparedness plan. A lot of people, financial might be a big issue as well. So keep that in mind. Now, having said that, once you do have yourself all set up to handle almost anything again, you won't know what's going to happen. That's the thing about emergencies is they come completely out of the blue. You will feel that sense of calm, that sense of peace. The anxiety will be kept to a minimum. When something happens, you'll have the plan in front of you, and you'll know exactly what to do in different scenarios. So by the end of this presentation, hopefully you'll have the big picture and a starting point for getting on track with your own emergency preparedness journal, and you'll feel closer to your family, you'll feel closer to your community as well. Now, we're going to take a look at some types of emergencies that you're going to expect, or they may be very, very uncommon in your area, but some things you, again, don't know, even if they've never happened before, they might happen to you. So, what do you want to do to prepare for these emergencies? Now, the dimensions of resilience, or how we handle these emergencies, fall into two primary categories: personal and non-personal. When it comes to personal, as I mentioned, your own health and well-being, the well-being of your family, mental, emotional, spiritual, and so on, your relationships, those all fall under personal. Non-personal would be more external, so economic collapse, community, cultural, and environmental, geological would be things that are not under your control. Some regions have a higher likelihood of experiencing things like tornadoes and hurricanes. Others, it's more earthquakes and so on. But we're going to get into more detail on all of that. I encourage you to check out the link. This presentation is going to be available. I'm going to share with you a little later on where you're going to find this presentation, and you'll have access to these links to explore in a little more depth what it means to be resilient in these two primary areas. So we're going to start with personal emergencies. What are the most likely issues that you will likely need to focus on and strengthen within yourself and within your family? Starting with physical injury and illnesses. Now, these are mostly under the control of the individual, with some catastrophic exceptions, such as cancer or massive injuries. The thing about injuries and illnesses is it tends to affect your family and even your coworkers, right? If you're off work, it means your coworkers have to pick up the slack. If it affects your family, it can be unpredictable. It can be a heart attack or a stroke. It can be a short-term illness, or it can be a long-term disability. These are all things that we can, to some degree, prepare for, though they are unpredictable. We don't know when they're going to happen, if they're going to happen, and yet there are still things that we can do. We can also prepare financially with a savings account that helps us weather the storm if we do get injured or have a serious illness. Now, we've experienced this significantly during the past 5 years through COVID, right? So you're going to want to keep that in mind. And throughout all of these physical and illness emergencies, it will impact your emotional, psychological, spiritual resources. You and your family are going to be affected on those levels as well. So it's not just about physical disabilities or illnesses, it's going to affect much more than just your body. And that comes to emotional, cognitive, and spiritual illness. So this is different from physical or bodily illnesses. This is about what's happening to you inside your heart, what's happening to you cognitively, how is your memory affected. Spiritually, this is where we see people losing um, the sense of meaning in life. They don't have a purpose. They don't know how to move forward. They're just, you know, walking through their day like a robot. This can happen when we're overwhelmed, when we have very high levels of anxiety, we're dealing with grief. So these are all things that we experience throughout life. We all do. It's part of being a human being. But we want to make sure that we're not letting things slide when it comes to our emotional well-being and letting it get worse. We can tap into some of the resources in our community and seek help. Make sure that you are connected to your family and community, that you have friendships, people you can count on to talk to and vent with, and be able to get better, more healthy perspectives on life. Now, the reality is that the culture that we live in and the economic conditions that we're living under now does put us at greater risk. So be really mindful of that and prioritize where you spend your money, where you spend your time, so that you don't get overwhelmed to begin with. But it's going to happen anyway. Now, your relationships are key to weathering the storm as well. Often, intimate partners struggle with communication. Communication breaks down. People don't understand each other, and they tend to become estranged, even parents and children. Family relationships can be a source of great joy, but they can also be a source of great pain. In that case, you want to seek out friends that can support you during times when your family just doesn't have the capacity to be there for you in ways that you need them to. Now, community groups used to be a good resource for keeping us connected and maintaining our well-being, giving us a sense of purpose. But now it's not so much happening because community groups seem to be more and more dispersed. There's not as much support coming from community groups, but you can start your own community group as well. So keep that in mind if you feel that that's something that's missing in your life. Now, when it comes to non-personal emergencies, these are less likely to impact you, but they're still important and you still need to prepare for them. So let's go through what this looks like, starting with economic. And indeed, I think economic emergencies are going to be the most likely of all of these non-personal emergencies. Loss of job, which is sort of falls under the personal as well, catastrophic health issues, which impact your income, sudden major expenses, your car breaks down, investment losses. So these are all things that can happen as a result of the economic system that causes the loss of job, causes catastrophic health issues such as your doctors are scarce or other issues. So keep that in mind. These can definitely impact you. And I think they're most likely with most people at some point. Remember the 2008 financial meltdown? It actually had a huge impact on my health because my clients weren't paying me, and so I couldn't pay my rent. I had to move in with a friend. That didn't work out. I became very depressed, and I had a nervous breakdown, and it was a horrible experience, all because the economy completely flatlined, and many people, not just me, of course, many people suffered the loss of homes and investments and so on. So that is probably one of the most important ones that you want to focus on beyond the personal, under non-personal. Now, cultural upheaval, such as we saw with the truckers going across Canada, supporting people who didn't want to get the vax, couldn't get the vax, and bringing that to Ottawa. There was a lot of upheaval in the town of Ottawa. I was there. I have family in Ottawa. People in the downtown area near Parliament Hill were profoundly affected by the protests that were happening. And a lot of that can happen as a result of propaganda and censorship that is telling a specific narrative that can tend to turn people against each other. You want to be really mindful of that, by the way, when you're watching mainstream news or reading mainstream newspapers. There is an agenda always at play. This is simply a fact of the human species. Powerful interests really want to control where people or what people believe, who they trust, and so on. So if you're seeing this happening, if you're seeing a lot of upheaval, question that narrative. Maybe there's a reason why people are joining protests. But while you're learning about that and understanding the issues, protect yourself. Make sure that you have the resources to leave town if it gets violent, for example. A lot of the reasons for these protests are the wealth gap and when people's freedoms and rights are being taken away. So you may want to contribute to those protests, But if you're not in a position to do so, then you're going to need to have the resources for that as well. So keep that in mind as we enter into a very, very challenging period in our history. Now, geologic disasters, much less likely to happen to most of us, unless you're in an area where there's earthquakes, avalanches, landslides, tsunamis. Most of us are not. But if you are, make sure that you have the insurance coverage, all that stuff that most people who do live in those areas already know how to do. And then there's weather and climate emergencies. This is much more likely to happen to most of us if you're in an area of extreme heat. I'm always shocked at how many people die from extreme heat, not just cold, right? So be prepared for that. Severe storms, we have had extremely powerful storms come through, ice storms, as well as winter storms. Floods and droughts happen almost everywhere. Wildfires have become much more serious over the past few years. Hurricanes, we saw what Melissa did down in Jamaica just a couple of weeks ago. So hurricanes I've actually been through a hurricane when I was a child. Scary experiences and something that we can prepare for again so that we can keep ourselves safe and keep our families safe. Some areas are prone to tornadoes, not very many areas, but they happen. Now, beyond that, we have infrastructure emergencies. Here, not too far from where I am in Brantford, in Mississauga, we had a train derailment with chemical spill. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is this can end up being a long-term emergency. So it's not about just getting out of town and then hopefully things get fixed. We saw, I'm not sure exactly where it was down in the States, we had a massive derailment, and those people are still living there and they're dealing with the sickness, illness, poisonings from that train derailment. Power outages back in 2003, I believe, we had a multi-day power outage, extremely serious in August. So the weather was beautiful, but without power, people couldn't cook food, they couldn't um, run equipment. So it was a pretty intense power outage, and that was due to lack of capacity. So the system was overwhelmed. Nuclear meltdown, if you have a nuclear power plant near you, that's something that can happen. We have Pickering nuclear power plant that has had issues in the past, and water toxification was another serious issue. So these are all things that can happen in many different places to infrastructure. Now, I'd like to go through a few slides about self-assessment and just check in with how ready you feel you are to handle these various types of emergencies. So let's see what we can do to prepare with each of these. I love using this risk assessment matrix and just plugging in each of those different risks that I touched on and putting them in the specific location in terms of severity and likelihood. So is it very likely but very low impact, negligible impact, or is it very likely and severe, in which case you really want to focus? If it's very likely to happen and it's going to impact you severely, you and your family, you want to put a lot of focus on anything that's in this red section in the matrix. So use this tool. You can do it up in a spreadsheet and just determine where your energy, time, money, resources need to go to ensure that you are safe. And again, you're going to check yourself with spiritual, mental, emotional, etc. Preparedness dimensions. Who do you need support from? Who's counting on you? Check in with all of these as you are working your way through your self-assessment. So that's important. And then what are the most important resources that you're going to need, physical, material resources that you're going to need as you prepare for each of those dimensions. So let's go through them. Let's go through things like food and water, medications, step by step. Now, here's a short list. We're going to break it down individually, but short list is each of these are things you're going to need to focus on in order to make sure you're prepared. So let's go through them one by one. Now, I do want to mention that I'm going to be providing you with solutions to many of these, not all of them, online. And that way you will step by step be able to make sure that you are, in fact, fully prepared, starting with food and water. And when it comes to food and water, make sure you include your pets. Make sure you take into account allergies and sensitivities. Get backup medications, supplements if you depend on those. Water purification tablets. You can order these off Amazon. They're very cheap. You may want to get a water purifier, flask, or jug so that if you have to take up stream water, lake water, whatever, it will do a really good job of purifying. But nothing's perfect, so you want both. You want water for cleaning, and you want a heat source to boil water as well. Now, how much water do you need? Let's take a look at this online resource that you can check to determine how much water is appropriate. And you can see here, daily water intake calculator. And then there is also daily food, and this is on our website, Easy Prepping. Food storage calculator, how much food should you have stored? This is more long-term, of course. Most of us can handle getting 3 days worth of food together, but if it looks like it's going to be a long-term extreme emergency, then you want to set yourself up with a food storage plan. You may, if it's a long-term emergency, also need to consider hunting for small game and foraging for food. Foraging is something almost everyone can do. Once you know what is edible, what is safe, and that way you will have the skills necessary to successfully survive healthy without, getting sick. And that way the foraging that you're going to be doing will enable you to survive those short or long-term emergencies. But I also have links to learn about foraging and also about small game hunting, as well as preparing the small game. Next, medications. Be aware that medications is one of those things that is unique to every family, individual, and that the people who are not prepared, especially those who use opioids, because they are highly addictive, they're going to be on the lookout for anyone who can feed that addiction. So if you're an opioid user, make sure you have your backup supply and you have it in a secure location, right? You want that to be available if you need it during emergencies. Try and look for herbal alternatives for prescriptions, such as turmeric paste for arthritis or white willow for pain. Check out your local health food store and ask them for suggestions for replacements to medications that you're currently taking as a prescription. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of alternatives out there. We just don't know about them because we're in a medical system that would prefer we don't. Next, first aid. Basic first aid skills are essential, even if it is short term, and even if you yourself don't need first aid, there are likely to be people who do need first aid. I have prepared links to online courses, and you can take those courses, get certified, get a kit, and you can be of service to other people even if you don't need it yourself. But as much as possible, what you want to do is get healthy. Just get healthy so that you're less likely to get injured or get sick, so that you're not having to depend on an overstressed system. And then shelter is another concern when you're working with or when you're in an emergency. You're going to need to consider temporary, at least with a tent, perhaps your vehicle makeshift from available materials. If you can't leave the city by car, by van, you will have to walk, you will have to make shelter. If you don't have a tent handy, you're going to have to learn these skills if you want to make sure that you have a way to protect yourself, especially in the winter, but also in the summer. If there's a lot of rain and so on, you will need some kind of shelter. And often it's sometimes just a matter of getting a tarp and learning how to make a shelter out of a simple tarp. Permanent shelter might involve finding an abandoned house or building, or setting up a trailer or someone's cottage. If you have someone that you know, or maybe you have a cottage yourself, offered to people who need a place to stay long term, right? So these are all extremely important resources as well, especially with extreme emergencies. Staying connected is next. When it comes to being connected, you want to know who you need to connect with in an emergency. You want to have a way to reach family, especially friends and neighbors, and what kind of communication will depend on what's available. So if there's no cell tower, you might want to get walkie-talkies, have you and your spouse have a walkie-talkie ready in an emergency so that if you get separated, you have a way to communicate with each other, make sure that they are charged. And um, ham radio is another option. I got my ham radio uh, certification license a couple of years ago because in an emergency, ham radio is specifically designed for emergencies, and the ham radio station that's enabling us to communicate around the world in any kind of emergency has its own power supply. So it is one thing that you can trust in pretty much every emergency, every type of emergency. So I recommend getting a ham radio license if you can. I provide a link to a free crash course in ham radio operation. You don't need a license, by the way, to actually work with it in an emergency, right? If it's an emergency and you happen to have a ham radio and you know how to use it after taking the crash course, then you can use it. Nobody's going to give you a hard time if you use it during an emergency. And then what communication protocol do you need? And by this, I mean a calling tree. So you, your neighbors, your family can set up a calling tree which allows you to communicate much more efficiently through groupings of people who pass along important information to keep people safe and keep them connected, so that if something catastrophic happens, everyone will have a way to communicate the latest information and keep people um, moving forward. So keep that in mind as well. Now, when it comes to power, we need power for heat, light, cooking, and charging. And I personally have a power bank. You can buy power banks on Amazon for reasonably cheap. They're not um, cheap, but you can get one for $200-300, and it will keep your phones charged for a few days, week, and at the very least, I highly recommend that. Um, this heat source can be a generator as well. You can also have propane heaters. I have a propane heater. I even have fire and firewood. Not a lot, but enough for a couple of days in a pinch. Um, and I keep all of these in my storage locker. My storage locker is about a 5-minute drive. It's probably a half-hour walk from where I am. And so if something happens, I know that I can get to it and I can keep myself safe and warm, especially in winter, but all times of the year can be a problem. Obviously, in the cold months, you'll need the heat. And make sure that you provide for safety if you are getting your heat from flammable heat sources, right? So safe to get a fire blanket, for example. Next, light. Many types of lighting can be used in emergencies. Um, you can get lanterns that are sourced with fuel, power banks. You'll need some extra batteries, solar panel. I have a solar panel. I also recommend if you get a solar panel that you find out how long it takes to charge phones and other devices that you will need. Um, they can be critical because if you think about it, at night, when you're in the middle of a disaster and there is no light, we take it for granted, but it's completely dark and there are criminals going around victimizing vulnerable people. You want to make sure that you can see well enough to get away from danger. And so every person in the family should have their own source of light. So prepare for that as well. And then, of course, cooking. This is especially if it's a more long-term situation. If you're forced to hunt for game, you're going to need to cook that food, such as rabbits and so on. And you'll need the fuel to go with a stove such as this. If you are cutting wood, not so much. But if this is your preference, make sure you have a decent stove. It doesn't have to be a double burner, it can be a single burner. You can get them small enough to fit in your backpack or fit in a backpack. And you'll need to learn how to prepare the meat. So I put a link to a video that teaches you how to do that as well. And there are schools you can go to that help you to learn that. Now, when it comes to power banks again for your electronic devices. Generators are great, but they need fuel in order to work and run appliances or other equipment. So keep that in mind when you're using generators. Now, financial is where we want to make sure that we're prepared for um, catastrophic issues, such as the banks are all closed, or with a power outage, no ATMs are working. Situations like that can be the difference between eating and not eating, because cash still, no matter what comfort level you have with using cards, it's still king, especially in emergencies. So you want to also plan your family budget. You want to save up that money. You want to put money aside. Both spouses should have enough money so that if they are separated, maybe they're working during this emergency, they're at work during the emergency, maybe one spouse is at home or at their job, whatever the case may be, you want to have multiple sources of cash so that until you get together and deal with the emergency appropriately, you'll have some way of paying for the services that you're going to need or the food, water, and so on. We cannot count, and I cannot emphasize this enough, we cannot count on government providing for us. Um, I'll share a little bit more later on about that. And then, of course, there's security issues. Security is one of those things that people tend to leave to the last. They're a bit intimidated by firearms and other weapons, knives, and so on. But I want you to know that even without these tools for defense, you can buy bear spray. You can even make your own version of bear spray. There's recipes on YouTube. You can also get zappers, devices that are able to give someone who's attacking you enough of an electric shock that it gives you a little bit of time, buys you time to get away. And having done so, you're going to be a lot safer and you're going to be able to continue on your journey. Make sure you provide for wearables, tactical gear, alarms, and accessories. I have this door alarm. I insert it into the latch, and if somebody breaks in, I'm going to be woken up if I'm sleeping, and I'll be able to protect myself. I recommend firearm licensing, though you don't have to have a license to use a firearm to protect yourself. At least I don't think you should. It's about the training for the license that is what matters. So get training, try and get your license if you can, and that way you can use it without any legal issues. But in my opinion, it's important to at least prepare. You may somehow be in a situation where there's a firearm available. You want to know how to use it. It may not be yours. It may be, you may be at somebody's house. You want to have that skill under your belt. And then, of course, transportation is huge. We're talking about your own vehicle, of course, but you want to make sure that it's got everything that possible that you need, critical content, critical materials that you can take with you should you need to leave by a vehicle and you can use a vehicle. A lot of times, emergencies, you're not able to use a vehicle because the roads are jammed, or maybe you don't have enough gas. Maybe you forgot to get gas, and so the gas tank will only take you a few kilometers, which is another point. Make sure that you at least always have half a tank of gas at all times. You want to get a trustworthy mechanic. I have an amazing mechanic. I ask him to look for things that he sees as he's maintaining my vehicle that may actually be a problem in future. He has permission to tell me about those things so that I can get it repaired or replaced before it becomes a serious problem. So hopefully you have a trustworthy mechanic, but find one and make sure that you have your jumper cables, spare bulbs. I would even recommend getting spare wiper blades. They don't take up a lot of space. Anything that will make your vehicle not drivable is super important. So these are all key. I have an actual video tutorial on YouTube. The link is going to be in the links that I'm going to share with you so you can see how I've prepared my vehicle with everything that I could uh, live in for a couple of weeks. I would still need to find a source of water, but food wise, in every way, winter or summer, I can live in that vehicle for at least 2 weeks. And that's enough time to get where you need to go to escape whatever emergency situation that is not safe. So think about how you can get your vehicle prepared sufficiently for you, your family, and again, that'll bring about a level of um, confidence that you can leave in an emergency and survive just fine. Now, if you don't have a car, then obviously that's not going to be of any use to you. So, what you need to do then is check out the public transit schedule or coordinate with other people who also don't have a vehicle and rent a van, or find out if there is anybody that you know that has a vehicle who would be willing to partner with you in case of emergency, right? It could be family, it could be friends, and offer to pay money towards maintaining the vehicle and so on to make it a mutually beneficial arrangement, right? So keep that in mind. And next, bicycle. If you have a bicycle, great. That may be the only way, the best way to leave an emergency situation. Make sure that your bicycle is well maintained. Have some spare tires as well, spare um, inner tubes, so that you can replace them in case they do get a flat, and bring your weather gear. If you can, bring a lightweight tent. You can get tents in small packages, by the way. If you have your backpack, throw it in there, and it will at least keep you from being rained on or snowed on in case of emergency. So that can keep you going for at least a few days. And that way you can get back home and you'll be safe. Now, further to that, You might have a motorcycle. You may want to invest in a scooter or an electric bike. I have a scooter as well. You have to charge it, mind you, so keep it charged so that you can get away. And again, with a scooter, it's electric, but a lot of scooters can get you far enough out of the city. Mine goes for, I think, 30 miles out of the city. I don't know what that is in kilometers, but it's far enough that I can get to safety with my backpack. And that way I can work out what my next step is from a location where I'm not in a situation where I'm not safe, right? So investigate these options as well. Wagons can be useful if you are on foot and you need more supplies, especially if you are a family without a vehicle and it's not practical for everybody to take their bike or whatever. Sometimes a wagon is what's necessary. Do what's necessary to make sure that you're safe as you leave that situation. Now, documents are going to be necessary as well. I'm thinking flooding, emergencies, things like that, where all of your documents, such as contracts, financial, legal documents, these are all submerged, destroyed, and no longer available. So you want to first scan everything, make sure that you have it on a USB to be able to keep and print those documents if you need to and replace them as needed. You want to also print a contact list, have everyone's phone number, because even though your cell phone may be available, if it dies, then your printed contact list is your backup, right? So keep something printed with key contacts that are the most important, and that's going to be in your package of documents. You may have to get a passport, you may have to travel, you may have to leave the country in order to be safe. So make sure all of those are kept up to date. Photocopies of your identification. You can also again, make sure you have enough cash and you can keep it in the documents package. So it's another source that you can use as backup when you need to stay safe. All right. So consider the possibility. Um, People have had to do this a lot. They've left the country because of war. They've left as refugees, and they didn't always have their papers with them. So the better able you are to pull those all together and have them ready, the easier it's going to be when you arrive in another country as a refugee to be able to settle in. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but people deal with it all the time. Now let's take a look at the community resources you're going to have and what you can do. Now, this is where we get into expanding our influence to enable and empower other people, like our neighbors. Hopefully, you are on good terms with your neighbors. Um, I recommend meeting with your neighbors and discussing a community emergency preparedness plan and funding it so that you can pull together a pantry that all of your neighbors, as well as you, have access to in case of emergencies, have access to a shelter, security. All of this can be planned out. And let me know if you're interested in the comments below if you're interested in setting something up, and I will help you get started. You're going to need to do a SWOT analysis. What resources does your community currently have? What things where are the gaps? What opportunities? What threats? So those are ways of thinking about going beyond your own household and caring for other people in your area. The more you care for them, the less inclined they are going to come to you and try and take what you've got. Now, there is an excellent book that I highly recommend, The People's Emergency Plan. This is for community organizing for emergencies. This is a Canadian captain, retired. He's been working on this for quite a while. He's created a YouTube playlist as well that's got a whole bunch of videos that shows how he did it. He's being interviewed in some of those videos, but he has a conversation about what it means to put together a community organization that helps everyone in your community, not just you, to benefit from the emergency support. So I'm a big believer in community being foundational when it comes to surviving catastrophic emergencies. Now, there are lots of local and online resources. I'm going to be providing you with a whole bunch of links. Where can you start? How can you get help? Who can you ask? So, once you finalize your plan, and that means once you finalize where the gaps are specifically for you and your family, and where you need to contact people about getting resources, whether individually as a family or your community, where do you start? I've got a number of resources that will put you on the right track. And always remember that you can always start with your own mental and physical and emotional well being. I mean, that to me is the starting point. You'll never be ready for every emergency, but there is a lot that you can do to prepare yourself. So check these out. Emergency backpack kit at the website 72hours.ca. This website is amazing. They provide all kinds of resources and make it super easy. You might pay a little bit more than you would if you were to put all of these supplies together yourself. But what's cool about it is they've thought of everything. So it's going to cover off almost all of those checklist items for what you will need for emergencies. And you can get it for yourself. You can get a backpack for each of your family, prepare for school emergencies, even pets is covered. And they have discounts, they have coupons, they have specials, sales, and stuff like that. So 10% off here. If you want to buy multiples, maybe you'll be able to get a deal on that. So check out the different emergency kits that they have on that website. And then first aid courses. I found this first aid course here in Brantford, where I'm located, firstaidforyou.ca. I believe they have multiple offices, though. They might have other locations. And there are first aid courses online that you can take. This one I think is $60. I'm not 100% sure, but price it out for yourself. It's well worth it, not only for your own well-being and your family, but you'll be a resource to help other people during those emergencies, which I think is one of the best ways to do this. If everybody gets a first aid course, none of us needs to worry or panic when the time comes and you're dealing with a broken leg or a cut or something that could be catastrophic, but with the proper first aid, it's an easy thing to take care of, right? So do yourself a favor, get your certification in first aid and let your neighbors know, let your family know that you did that, and maybe inspire them to do it as well. Again, online as well as in-person courses are available. Another important aspect of emergency preparedness is self-defense. Um, we talked about security. We've talked about getting a firearm license, but honestly, because those weapons can be used against you, they can also be dangerous to have on your person. So self-defense skills, you are the weapon, you have the skills, you can defend yourself. You can at least disable your attacker until such time as you get to safety. You can stop them in their tracks. Yes, it's not something I want to have to do, but if you are keeping yourself safe, you have every right to do that. I think self-defense is one of those skills that everybody should know. I am personally working on my own self-defense skills. I've taken a couple of courses. There's still a lot I can do. And yet, self-defense skills, you don't typically need that much skill to do the job, to actually make you safe. So I encourage you to check out self-defense skills in your area, price them out. So there are some self-defense videos, but obviously it's better to do it in person to actually get a feel for what it would be like in an actual situation where you're being attacked. So do a little bit of research, find out what works for you. Now, these are a couple of books that I recommend. The Transition Handbook is an amazing book that helps you learn how to survive long term. So it's about releasing yourself from oil dependency or from dependency on the infrastructure in general and becoming locally resilient with the help of community. It covers off a lot of things. I actually spent a lot of time with Transition Toronto and Village Vancouver, um, going through this book, teaching people, delivering workshops, and helping them understand that being independent of the infrastructure in your local area and helping other people in your community to also be independent, it just makes for a much safer community, much healthier community, right? Growing gardens and learning how to build homes and shelters, learning how to source water, clean water. All of these things are core skills. This is a wonderful place to start. There are transition groups in a lot of towns. There isn't one in Brantford. I may decide to start one at some point, because I'm a believer in personal independence from the system. Governments are not going to protect you in the case of emergency the way a lot of people assume, right? We've all heard horror stories of how government can often get in the way, which brings me to A Paradise Built in Hell. This is an incredible book that shares stories of how people helped themselves much more effectively than the governments that were supposed to. And we're talking municipal, regional governments, federal governments. They often get in the way. But if you, along with your neighbors, work together in community, you can actually solve a lot of your own problems in most emergencies, maybe not all. We do need government for major infrastructure damage and things like that, but there's a lot we can do on our own without counting on our government to save us, because honestly, government has not done a great job in the past, right? And same with the organizations, non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Often they can be problematic as well. They take the money from donations, but it doesn't go out to the people who most need it. So I encourage you to start reading these two books. You can probably borrow them from the library. There's various sources, and you can just check in with me, post a comment down below and ask of different ways you can get access to these books if you can't afford to buy them. I believe they're both available on Amazon, but if you can't afford to buy them and the library doesn't have a copy, just let me know and I will share with you a couple of options that you might be able to use. All right. So educate yourself and inspire yourself. You can do this. I am confident that together as human beings, with love for our neighbors, for our families, we can get through almost anything. We, as a species, have survived through unbelievable hardship. So I'm a big believer in human resilience. And then having said that, here are some of the resources. You can do your own research on any and all of these. I encourage you to do so. As you can see, the 72 Hours Emergency Kit is there, ham radio free YouTube crash course, call tree community plan. There's all kinds of good stuff here, even a free permaculture course, how a car works, free online course, so much good stuff. Additional online resources. Start educating yourself, set aside a couple of hours a week should do to just really find ways to empower yourself, your family, and your community, right? We can do this. Having said that, I also have a suggestion or an offering, I should say. You want to plan for the best, but prepare for the worst. Psychologically, you want to be aware that life can change suddenly and irrevocably with a disaster. Be patient with yourself. Understand the grieving process. Understand that not only is it hard for you to deal with the massive loss that can often come with catastrophic scenarios, but other people are grieving as well. And we need to be strong in the moment and then seek help once that moment has passed. Once the time has passed and you're back in a safe situation, get support to fully grieve what you've lost if that's happening to you. Community is one of the best ways to deal with grief. If you're moving to a new city, you may want to learn a new language and learn the culture of that new city that you've moved to. In North America, US and Canada, we all speak English. It's not that much of a stretch, but if you move to Mexico or if you move to Europe, um, many different languages there. It's helpful to actually learn a new language anyway, even if it's just Spanish or French. It's helpful to know a new language and just get a sense of the different cultures that are out there. It really does lift your spirits to empower yourself to expand your horizons. So be willing to change who you are in order to adapt to new situations and cultures. Now, I have provided some downloadable resources. These are mostly PDFs, but there's some Excel spreadsheets in here. The presentation that I'm sharing with you is in here. There's an entire survival drive that you can access, which breaks it down in great detail. There's some audio files that you can listen to. So I highly recommend that you check those out. And that way, again, you're going to be stronger and wiser as a result. And so at the end of this presentation, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I look forward to hearing from you. Post in the comments if you have any feedback on this presentation, if you think that there's something that I've missed, or you think that there's other information that I should be aware of that I can share. So on my website, Joy of Resilience, you will see some additional links on the specific page for my emergency preparedness course. So I am offering this online tomorrow, Monday, November 3rd, 2025 at 6:30. But here's some links as well. These links are also in the presentation, but you don't need to download the presentation to use them. And there is a document, personal family preparedness risk assessment and plan PDF file. And this is actually a good document as a starting point for the more practical things that you're going to need to do, right? So check it out. You'll do a family risk assessment survey. Excuse me. And then as you work your way through, there's 15 pages here. You'll find there are some links in here as well. When you download the PDF, you'll be able to click those links to further expand your knowledge. All right. So thank you again for spending time with me here. And in the meantime, take care and stay resilient. Bye for now. Love y'all.